Hello and welcome back to Storytime with Alex. We've finished now Supernatural Night Terror by John Passarella and moved on to something very different, guaranteed to have no bugs bursting out of anybody, as far as I know. It's my mum's book, Brandy Pearson. I can't read backwards. From Allbyon to Britannia, Book 1, The Witches of Old Albion. And there is a little introductory bit at the beginning that I shall read you now, a prologue if you will. Imagine a large, battered, old leather folder stuffed full of sheets of paper of various sizes and thicknesses. On the front, stories of the witches of old Albion in curly letters. Underneath there is a face. The hair and beard are made of leaves. Leaves are growing out of its mouth and nostrils. Inside the folder, the stories, some written in loopy handwriting on thick paper with wobbly edges. Some had been typed on a mechanical typewriter. Others were printouts from dot matrix printers, and some from more recent computer printers. All these stories were read to me when I was young. I didn't know it then, but the roots of everything that happened to us are in these stories, as the events in The Last Wizard grew out of what happened in The Last Witch. Maybe all stories begin in other stories. Who I am, who we are, I will leave for now. For now, we start with some of the tales of old Albion. It might be worth saying that these tales were told by the witches, so the wizards are not necessarily seen in a positive light. There, you have been warned. So, very festively, I'm going to start with the first story, The Witch and the 12 Days of Christmas. In the days of old Albion, when witches travelled the land bringing comfort, health and help, and wizards stayed safe in their towers reading their books, at least according to the witches, there was a saying, "A witch for a good Christmas." In small isolated villages in particular, if a witch came to stay, not only would she help with the winter ailments, she would have new tales to tell, and nothing made winter pass so well as the telling of a good new story. So the people of the village of Ecclesford were more than happy to welcome the wandering witch, Mistress Ellen Brent, who arrived with the first flurries of snow on St. Lucy's Day. That is December the 13th. She arrived in fine style in a caravan. They had heard that some witches now travelled in this way, but never thought they would see such a sight here in the northern dales. The caravan, drawn by a sturdy black horse with mane plaited with red ribbons and tiny bells, was decorated in traditional witches' colours, red, green and black, with splashes of gold. Some thought she might not stay, being too grand for such a small community, but she drew up her van on the village green by the beck, and politely asked the village mayor if she might stay there. She willingly wove a healing spell on an ailing cow, and gave a soothing tincture to a grandma with a hacking cough. She helped deliver a Christmas baby who had got turned around in the womb, provided some tasty herbs and peppercorns for Christmas gravy, and donated a bag of sultanas and several bottles of sloe gin to the festivities. The people were grateful and welcoming, and she did not need a bed, as she lived in her caravan on the village green. However, she knew full well that they were also hoping for a good tale, and indeed that was why she had come so far. The time for telling stories came, or at least started, on St. John's Day. Everyone had been to celebrate the patronal festival in church, and had been welcomed into the priest's house for a party in the evening. Full of food and drink, the adults were sitting around the fire, babies asleep on any adult who would have them, older children playing a complicated game with knucklebones in a corner, when Father Andrew called for someone to tell a story. All eyes were drawn to Mistress Brent. She smiled, took a sip of ale, and said, "I have a tale if you would like to hear it, and a Christmas tale at that. I've been looking forward to telling it, but I needed to find people like your good selves, far away from where it all occurred, for there are some who would prefer I kept my tale to myself. Would you like me to tell it to you?" Everyone nodded eagerly. The children stopped playing and started listening. She put down her drink and began. A couple of years ago, I overwintered down south in the city of the White Tower. My friend Kate had retired to the city, but I did not have my comfortable caravan at the time, and did not fancy a winter sleeping on her wooden settle, so I treated myself to a room in the Staff and Book, an inn on the river. It was right next to the Academy of High Magic, or the wizard's school as we witches call it, and I was a bit worried that the place would be full of wizards looking down their nose at me. But it turns out that wizards like home comforts at Christmas, so there were seldom any wizards around. It all started on the morning of Christmas Day. I opened the door of my room to go down to breakfast and nearly tripped over a small wooden chest. It had my name carved rather roughly on the lid. There was no one around, so I brought it into the room and went off to eat. I met Kate at the cathedral for Christmas Day Mass, but she had not left it for me. Her gift was a rather splendid pair of red and green knitted slippers. I did not know anyone else in the city. That evening, when I returned to my room to look more closely, I realised the box was locked, and that there was no key. I tried to open it with a hairpin, and a shot like lightning shot up my arm, and I nearly fell over. I was about to try to lever it open with my pocket knife, when I had the sense to sing a small spell and discovered that it was protected by magic too strong for me, so there was no way I could find out what was inside. The next morning, St. Stephen's Day, there were 2 blank books outside my door, parchment pages bound in leather. In each my name was written inside the cover in a shaky hand. The day after, like today, St. John's Day, I thought there was nothing, but as I turned to close the door behind me, I found a small cloth bag hung from the door latch, with my initials embroidered on it. Inside there were 3 hazelnuts. The next day, a flat box with my name painted on it, with 4 teaspoons inside, what they call apostle spoons, with a robed human figure on each handle. And the next day another little bag hung on the latch, this one of leather with my name scratched onto it, this one containing 5 silver coins. I scoured my book of shadows, tried every spell I could find, but could make no sense of any of it. But as I sat and contemplated this odd collection of gifts, a tune came into my head. It was the 5 silver coins that did it. That odd line in the 12 Days of Christmas that the mummers sang earlier. 5 gold rings, 5 silver coins. And I could hear the song, but with different words, different gifts. On the 5th day of Christmas a stranger came to me, she sang. 5 silver coins, 4 apostle spoons, 3 hazelnuts, 2 blank books, and a chest without a key. Of course, it didn't help me solve my puzzle. It made me laugh because it made even more mysterious. So I decided it was time to act. The next night I woke myself up before dawn, put on my coat against the cold, and wrapped my best invisibility spell around me. I quietly left my room, no one around, no peculiar gift yet left at my door, and waited. Just as the light was growing, I heard footsteps, bare feet padding along and water dripping. Up the corridor came a strange little figure, no taller than a child, with hair like duckweed and greenish skin. He was dressed in wet rags, and there was an iron collar around his neck. He was carrying something with a bit of sacking over it. As he placed it carefully in front of my door, I circled around him to cut off his retreat and grabbed his arm as I undid my spell. Obviously I gave him the fright of his life, and he wriggled furiously to get free. "I'm not going to hurt you," I said. "I just want to know what's going on." He stopped struggling, but said not a word. He pointed to the collar, and then to his mouth, and shook his head. With a little magic I realised that he must be enslaved to someone, and that his voice had been taken away. He pointed frantically back the way he had come, and put his hands together, pleading with me. "You've been enslaved, but your master doesn't know you're here?" He nodded vigorously. "He doesn't know you're bringing me these gifts?" He nodded again, but pleaded with his whole body to be let go. "Will you be back again? For the 12 days of Christmas?" Another nod. Then he pointed at the gift he had left, then at himself, and back down the corridor. I let him go, and he ran off. I thought of following him, but it was too fast for me, so I picked up the gift and returned to my room. Under the sacking was a cage of hazel twigs containing 6 brown and white mice. They looked very healthy, but were behaving oddly when I looked at them, and they looked back at me. "Good morning," I said, and they bowed to me. "I take it you're not really mice," I said. Each one shook its head mournfully. They were as silent as the green boy. "You've been enchanted, and you cannot speak, or squeak." Mournfully they nodded in unison. "The green boy has brought you to me so that I can help you." Hopeful nods. Do you know how I can help you? It's hard to do someone else's spell if you don't know exactly what it is. The hopeful look remained, but was not very helpful in itself. Not being very knowledgeable about city magic, later that day I went to the library. I came across a picture of someone like the Green Boy and found that he was a river sprite, which explained why he was so wet. They were very rare creatures, only found in this river in the Thames. So who had enslaved him? And why was he coming to me? He must want me to help the mice regain their own form, but what about all the other gifts? How did they all fit together? And with that thought, I think it's time for my bed. Everybody groaned. I'll tell you more tomorrow night. And I will tell you more tomorrow in the next instalment of The Witch and the 12 Days of Christmas. I'm going to see if I can put a link to this. It is available through Lulu. Thank you. See you next time.